Markiplier hit the big screen with a horror film based on indie horror game Iron Lung. Did it fall flat, or did Markiplier set the standard for indie horror games hitting theaters? Let's get into it. For a boiled down synopsis of this film, basically we see Markiplier as the main protagonist, a convict named Simon, who boards the submarine called the Iron Lung to explore a blood ocean on a barren moon, looking for information regarding missing stars and planets. In regards to what could have been better, in my opinion, the first hour of the movie was a bit of a drag. There were some moments where it felt like it was prolonged or just dragged on, and there were some key seeds that were planted in the beginning, but until we got to the second hour really provided a good experience in my viewing, and I feel like it saved my overall opinion of the film. I do feel like the film itself was 2 hours and 7 minutes, but it could have been reduced down to 30 minutes shorter or 40 minutes shorter by cutting the first hour of the film down to 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Like I said, it just prolonged and felt dragged on for quite a bit. There were some audio issues as well. It was really hard to hear the operators at certain points when they were speaking to Simon through the speaker that was on the submarine, the Iron Lung, which felt like it created an avenue where some of the context was missing or some details got missed, which really affected the plot and sort of just, it felt like missing pieces as a viewer, and you're kind of like, what I miss? Also, we're in a blood ocean on a barren moon. I felt like we should have gotten more interaction with some of the beings that existed in this blood ocean. We do get to see them through pictures that Simon takes with the camera that's attached on the submarine. However, I feel like there could have been a greater sense of danger, which could have created more care in the viewer for Simon if, the ship kind of gotten attacked by one of the beings. However, there was a severe lack of that. Until we got to the second hour, again, there was just a severe lack of care for the protagonist, in my opinion. And I feel like they could have really amped up the intensity by creating more scenes with some of these creatures. Another area that missed the mark for me, pun intended, lame, I know, there were some flashbacks regarding Simon when he was younger, and a lot of them just didn't make sense to me. Honestly, they felt really misplaced in this film. I loved the idea of the flashbacks, but I felt like they could have been used to explain why Simon became a convict. How was he involved in the crime that he was accused of doing? Because later on in the film, he pledges that he's innocent, essentially. So if they could have created a better sense of character development through the flashbacks and creating a better understanding as to how he even got here, I think as a viewer, we would have cared more about Simon much earlier, and it would have created a better plot for the movie overall. Overall, the first hour of the film, I only cared about Simon because I care about Markiplier. I didn't care about Simon, the character. And again, I think that's because of the missed opportunities with the flashbacks, and some of the dialogue just felt like it could have been better. It felt like there could have been better interactions, create a greater sense of danger. And why are they forcing Simon in this case to go on this adventure? When it comes to what went well, the second hour of the film did save this for me. There was a greater sense of danger. A fire occurred on the Iron Lung, and there was just a lot more activity, a lot more pressure in terms of time as oxygen started to deplete, and more clarity around Simon's possibility of survival started to occur. This second hour is when I went from caring about Simon because he's played by Markiplier and caring about Simon the character. It felt like I cared about him more and wanted him to succeed rather than just cheering on Markiplier. I did appreciate that there were 2 or 3 comedic moments in this film. It didn't feel out of place, and it was delivered well by Markiplier because of his eccentric personality. But in a sci-fi survival horror film, I feel like it was really actually implemented quite well, and I appreciated it. And it provided some relief from all the intensity that ensued in the second hour. The makeup team did their big one in this film. The injuries to Simon's forearms, the blisters and bubbles and tears that would appear on him looked incredible, and that was one of the biggest parts beyond like just how well they did in the second hour of this film. That was another like one of the small details that made you care more about Simon and his well-being, and they deserve their flowers. They they made shit look nasty. I will say they also did a great job with the psychological horror elements, where it seems like Simon's kind of hallucinating or imagining or seeing things appear on the iron lung, or he's hearing things, having interaction with operators, but then actually not really having interaction with them. I think they did a great job with creating that confusion in this setting. Something I think they did a fantastic job with as well is how much they achieved in such a small, confined area. This entire film predominantly takes place in this small submarine. The entire thing, essentially. We see very little of the outside world around Simon, other than in the pictures and in a small interaction area in the first hour that he has with the operators. But other than that, the entire film pretty much takes place in the iron lung. Some of the visuals were actually really well done as well, so I want to make sure I shout that out. Some of the blood ocean seeping in to the iron lung and it appearing all over the ship was really well done. I appreciated that. My overall opinion is that this movie is simply okay. If I went someplace or somebody turned it on, would I scoff at the fact that it's on? No. Would I go out of my way to see this film a second time? Also no. I was really happy to support Markiplier, and even more so when I found out after watching the film that it was self-financed. I think content creators get a lot of flack, but I appreciate the fact that content creators are just people that are crazy enough to try and pursue their dreams, and Markiplier's living his. So props to him, and I'm glad that he pursued this, and it seems to be doing really well. With that being said, I'm gonna smash the first hour again. It was a drag. Most of it was boring. I didn't really care for it. It set a really hard precedent for recovery for the film, but they did quite good in the second hour at recovering my enjoyment, and again, it just made the film simply okay. Missed opportunities with character development and flashbacks and creating a greater sense of danger, I think were really the biggest impact in my ability to enjoy this film. Again, not to overstate it, but this film is simply okay. If money is tight, or you're concerned about how you're spending your finances or where you're spending them, especially with all of the different options that are existing in horror over the past few years, but especially this year, it's pretty tough out there for horror films, horror games. There's a lot of competition. I wouldn't advise that you spend your money in going and seeing Iron Lung. Again, if your finances are tight and you're not sure what to go see, I would advise to hold off and see some of the things that are coming out. I think you'll get more bang for your buck and more enjoyment out of it. But overall, again, am I mad that I spent the money to go see Iron Lung? No, I'm not. I think there's a lot of potential here for Markiplier, and there's a lot he can learn from this film. As somebody that's the producer, writer, director, and main protagonist, he wore a lot of hats in this film. But I think there were some things that went really well. There were some things that totally missed the mark, not to use that pun twice in the same video. But if anybody can take this criticism or criticism that appears online about this film and make an even better film if he does this again and have a huge success, I think it's Markiplier. Again, there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of hope. And I do really, really hope that Markiplier continues to make films, especially turning indie horror games into films so we can see them in theaters.